Introducing the remarkable archetype, the dangerous gentleman. With a demeanor that commands respect and a hint of potency, he embodies strength tempered by virtue. Though his capabilities could veer towards danger, he channels his power for noble causes, serving others and safeguarding those in need. Rooted in a profound love for both God and humanity, he navigates life with discipline and purpose. In his presence, one witnesses the harmonious blend of power and benevolence, a testament to the true essence of masculinity. Step into the world of the dangerous gentleman, where strength is wielded for righteousness, and discover a captivating embodiment of honor and valor. Welcome to Storytime with the Dangerous Gentleman. Yes, I am the Dangerous Gentleman. No, I did not give myself that nickname, but I certainly did earn it. Last week I shared the story of my oldest son's birth, and that's a pretty big day in any man's life. But I want to share with you another very important day in any young man's life, and that is his first car, the day he gets his first car. And yeah, it's a big deal, especially where we grew up, because we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and in order to get anywhere, we had to get a ride or walk, and it was a long way. In our particular peer group, none of the guys owned a car. So my brother and I were about 17, and we had just taken driver's ed, and we decided it was time for us to get a car. So the year before, we lived very close to the Canadian border. So there had been a guy from Canada who had been driving through our area, and he had gotten into a car accident where he hit a telephone pole. And he decided not to take the car back to Canada because it was a big deal taking it across the border. So he had left it at our neighbor's house. And here was this car. It was a 1976 Dodge Aspen that had hit a telephone pole. So the whole front end was caved in. But we were told the motor is good. So we scraped up a little bit of money and we decided, hey, we can get this car on the cheap and we'll do what we can to get it running. And we'll have a good time. And we'll be the only guys with the car. So it'll be a really cool deal. So we took one of our friends who was a mechanic. He went over there and looked at it. He said, yeah, the motor's sound. If you can get this and this and this fixed, you should be good to go. So we decided to go for it. We bought the car. We gave the guy a couple $100 for the car. And then we had to get it home. And it ran. But we couldn't really drive it because with the front end all crashed in like that. The hood wouldn't latch. So we came up with this brilliant idea. We'll call it redneck ingenuity. We drove the car up to a telephone pole and we wrapped a chain around the telephone pole and we wrapped the chain around the front bumper of the car. And we put it in reverse and we gunned it. And when we hit the end of that chain, pulled out the bumper a little bit. Still wasn't quite enough to get the hood to latch. So we had to do this 2 or 3 times, but we finally got to the point where we could get the hood down and we wrapped a bungee cord around it and we drove it about 2 miles. It was about 2 miles from our neighbor's house to our house. And so then we had our car at home. So let me describe it. A 1976 Dodge Aspen is a 2-door kind of a sporty car. This one was not in good condition. It had been rusted out. Well, I already mentioned that it had hit a telephone pole, so that's not a good thing, but it was also very rusted out. And so like the panels were rusted out, the seats were kind of rotten, you couldn't get into the trunk with the key, you had to use a screwdriver. So it wasn't a great car, but it was our first car, and it had an engine that ran. It wasn't street legal yet. We'll get there. So for the first couple months that we had this car, we could drive it. We didn't drive it on the road. That was the line that my parents drew. Like, we did a lot of crazy redneck country boy stuff, but they're like, you're not going to drive that car on the road. But as I mentioned before, we lived on the edge of like 1,500 acres of Forest Service land or logging property with all kinds of roads in it. And so we used to take this car out boonie crashing. And we would drive out into the woods in this car that, again, barely ran. The shocks were completely destroyed in it. So the shocks were so bad that the back end of the car actually was lower than the front end of the car. And if you got up to going very fast at all, the front end of the car completely came up off the ground. Like I said, there's going to be multiple episodes about the car. So we would take this car boonie crashing and we would drive out into the woods and we would map out a little track, like a loop. And then we would all take turns, me and my brother and my other brother, who was not even close to a licensed driver, and then my friend Brian. There was usually one or two other people, and we would go out there and we would spin out around these tracks that we had set up, and we would time ourselves to see who could get the fastest time. And it was these big sandy roads. So we would just be spitting up sand and dirt and rocks and just crashing around these tracks. And we would do this for hours and hours at a time. Usually what ended up happening, well, first of all, this car, the tires on it were not good to start with. So they weren't great. But we would go spinning around these tracks at just ungodly speeds. And then we would pop a tire. And here we were out in the middle of the woods, maybe a mile or two from home. And we would have to stop where we were. We couldn't drive the car back now because not only was the tire flat, but we were usually stuck in the sand. So we'd have to jerry rig. We'd have to set a bunch of logs and rocks underneath the car in order to get the jack to work. So then we'd get the tire off, and then we'd have to hike a mile back to my parents' house. And then we'd have to get this tire repaired. Good thing, one of my good friends, his dad had a huge tire pile. And I don't know if you know what a tire pile is. If you didn't grow up in the country, then you don't really understand the concept of a tire pile. But basically, that's the idea that there are people who hoard tires. And my brother's dad hoarded tires. So whenever anyone was like, oh, I got an extra tire, anytime he saw tires, he would just grab all these tires. And so he had this huge pile of hundreds of tires and rims. It was just insane. And they weren't organized or categorized or anything like that. So what happened was we'd get the flat tire, we'd jerry rig it to get the tire off, we'd hike it back a mile to my mom's house, and then we would drive, and then we would find a way to get up to my buddy's house, and we'd dig through this tire pile for sometimes hours at a time in order to find a tire that would fit on the car. Then we'd have to reverse the process, get the tire back to my mom's, hike it all the way back out to where the car was. Again, jerry rig it to get the car jacked up, get the tire back on, and on we would go. And then we would just do it again and again and again. I don't know how many tires we went through. It was just insane. We popped 2 tires at the same time. It's quite a feat. So what we were doing was we got to the end of this. There was this nice steep curve, and we used to try to take curves as fast as we possibly could in order to get up on less than 4 wheels. So we went around this one corner of this one particular time, and we felt the car get up, and we were up on 2 wheels. I believe that they were both on the driver's side, and then all at once, the whole car just kind of shifted, and we popped both those tires at the same time. So now we had to go find 2 replacement tires. And what we did, we got it running again, and we took it and got it up to my mom's house. I don't know how many hours and hours and hours we spent out in those fields. Like, we terrorized those fields and those old backcountry roads, boonie crashing, having a good time. Well, so slowly over time, because it took a little while. It took a little while to get the car street legal because, like I said, this was a Canadian guy who had gotten into a car crash and left the car on the side of the border. So getting the title and getting the registration and getting everything transferred into our name to make it street legal was quite a feat. But eventually, we had the title in hand and we were now street legal. We're still holding the hood down by a bungee cord. So, it's still not real secure. We've done a bunch of stuff to try to get it working, but it's still being held down by a bungee cord. So the first time, we were so happy. I remember the day we were so happy. We were street legal and we were going to go take this car down, and we were actually going to drive it a couple miles down the road. So we get out at my mom's house and we go down and we turn onto the highway and we start zipping down to where the church is. That's where we were going to take the maiden voyage, was down to the church. And as we're coming around the corner and we get up to speed, 50, 60 miles an hour. Now remember, shocks are so bad that the front end actually rides up in the air. So we start to hit speed and we come around the corner and we get hit with a gust of wind now. And the hood that bungee cord let loose and the entire hood now flipped up and folded over the front of the car. Now remember, we're driving 60 miles an hour down around a corner on a country road. And yeah, let me tell you that maybe our pants weren't dry when that was all done, but we came to a screeching halt around the corner, able to get the car off the road safely. And we get out, and yep, there is a perfect, we were able to peel the hood back from the top of the car. The windshield didn't crack, so that's a good thing. But there's a perfect crease right in the hood where that hood had folded up over the roof of the car. So we were able to then pull that down. We pulled it down, and we took what remained of the bungee cord, and we tied it around the bottom of the hood and tied it around the front of the car, the bumper, or so I don't remember where we tied it. And we were able to limp it down and turn it around and drive it back up to my mom's house. And my brother was driving, and because that hood wasn't flat, it was still halfway folded up. He had to lean his head outside of the car so he could look down the road and see where he was going. And we got it back to my mom's house. And let's just put it this way, that was not the last time. That might have been the first time that we folded a hood. It wasn't the last time. That we went through 2 or 3 hoods in that car. We would just go to the junkyard and we'd find another one and we would change it out. We got pretty good at changing out the hoods of that car. So you may be wondering, every good car, let me just say this, every good car, every epic car has a name. And the name of my brother and I's first car, that 1976 Dodge Aspen, was appropriately the Beast. I know you won't believe it. It's a crazy story, that car. And this is just the first episode. I'll tell you some more stories about what the adventures that we had in that car. And that car took on a life of its own, and it had a reputation, not just amongst our little community, but the entire county knew that car by the time we were done. And we'll get into more of those stories. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this one as much as I enjoyed telling it. And we will talk to you next time. So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.